أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وعنده مفاتح الغيب لا يعلمها إلا هو ويعلم ما في البر والبحر وما تسقط من ورقة إلا يعلمها ولا حبة في ظلمات الأرض ولا رطب ولا يابس إلا في كتاب مبين. In the previous lecture, we spoke about all of the letters that the Prophet, not all of them, but many of the major letters that the Prophet ﷺ wrote to all of the rulers of his time, of surrounding kingdoms and empires. And we said that this was a result of one of the results of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, that the Prophet ﷺ was able to turn his attention to those things. That's one of the major outcomes of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. The other one is what we will discuss today, and this was that the Prophet ﷺ was able to turn his attention militarily to Khaybar. Now, when you look at the traditional Sirah, the way it's written, the letters of the Prophet ﷺ to the different rulers, they don't necessarily discuss it the way we discussed it. They sort of just talk about it later. But the reason I put it in this order is that, well, one, I'm following the order of the Rahiq al-Makhtoum book, which is a very good chronology. And also to emphasize the point that this is one of the benefits that the Prophet ﷺ gained from signing this peace treaty. So he didn't have to worry about the problem from Quraysh, he didn't have to worry about the problem from Mecca, he could turn his attention elsewhere. So today is the other benefit, which was that Khaybar was always one of the agitating forces. They happened to be Jewish, and I say it in that way because this is not a essential conflict between Islam and Judaism, as some people would want to believe it. They happened to be Jewish, but for whatever reason, from the beginning, they decided, the people of Khaybar decided, like the other Jewish tribes, not all the Jewish tribes, some of the Jewish tribes before, they wanted to subvert the strength of Medina. They colluded with the people of Quraysh. This resulted in the Battle of the Ditch, all of the things that we've talked about in previous lectures. So now it was time for the Prophet ﷺ to take care of this threat once and for all. When we talked about Medina and we talked about the Hijrah, we spoke about Medina being a state, what we call today a country or a nation. When we say Medina today amongst Muslims, we refer to the city where the Prophet ﷺ is resting. Medina al-Munawwara, that's how we refer to it. But when we refer to it in the Sirah, we need to understand that Medina is much more than simply a city. It's a state, it's a nation. And to prove that, Khaybar, the city or the suburb or the region of Khaybar that we're going to talk about today, is about 60 to 80 kilometers away from the heart of the city of Medina. But yet it was part of the initial constitution of Medina, because these were the tribes. Remember we said that there were about 20 Jewish tribes that signed this treaty with the Prophet ﷺ to form this body politic, to form this nation, to form this country called Medina. So when we refer to Medina in the Sirah, we have to understand that it has a different connotation, politically and geographically. And a lot of the major Jewish tribes that signed, they actually were outside of the downtown area of Medina, not the suburbs, but elsewhere. And that's why all of that region, to get in totality, in the beginning of the Hijrah, after the signing of the Constitution of Medina, we refer to all of that as the state of Medina. And therefore, people that violate the treaty, people that collude with the enemy, people that try to subvert the strength of the government, they are going to be dealt with according to what was appropriate at that time politically, whether they be brought to justice, or they be attacked, or they be expelled, etc. So I say this so we can understand, because the things we will talk about today, if you don't know the context, you can draw many, many false conclusions. So there were two major threats after Mecca. One was Khaybar, which was slightly to the north. The other one was in Najd, which is today the eastern part of the Arabian Peninsula, like where the city of Riyadh is today. That area, but that's far away. So Khaybar is something that's really pressing. And remember, what is north of Medina is the Levant, is the Sham. And that's important because that's where trade is happening. So the Prophet ﷺ can't afford that the trade routes be blocked. So they were threatened from the south, Mecca. They were threatened from the north, Khaybar. They're threatened from the east, but a distance, Riyadh or Najd, that area. So you have to understand this pressure that's going on all of these years after the Prophet ﷺ migrates from Mecca to Medina. That's a lot of pressure, militarily, economically, politically, etc. So after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, the Prophet ﷺ, alhamdulillah, now he can deal with the other tensions. We said that the Prophet ﷺ signed the Hudaybiyah Treaty around the Hajj time because they originally went to Mecca to perform Hajj. So they're coming back now at the end of the year and the beginning of the new year. So right when the new year starts, and here we are talking about the year 7 of the Hijrah, the Prophet ﷺ made it known to the Sahaba that he's going to go to Khaybar. So Abdullah ibn Ubay ibn Sulul, the leader of the hypocrites, he sends news to Khaybar that the Prophet ﷺ is turning to Khaybar. And Khaybar united with another tribe that is north of itself called Ghatafan. And at that time, this was common. You know, the tribes, smaller tribes link up with larger tribes and for protection or whatever. So Ghatafan sought to preempt the attack on Khaybar. So before the Battle of Khaybar, there's a small battle called the Battle of Dhul Qird. And this happened 3 days before Khaybar, in which the people of Ghatafan sent, like I guess we could say commandos, to an area outside of Medina in which the Prophet ﷺ had his own livestock there. And they stole the livestock, stealing property. And during this excursion, the famous Sahaba Salama ibn al-Aqwa, radiallahu anhu, Salama ibn al-Aqwa, radiallahu anhu, he single-handedly warded off the threat, saved the livestock, warned the people of Medina, and not only that, but after he got the livestock, he told the Prophet, now I want to go after them because now the people that came, now they're thirsty. They left. I surprised them. He was like hiding in a tree and he was firing at them. And he was very brave, all by himself. And the Prophet said, this is enough. You got the livestock, no reason to attack. Now I want you to understand how significant that statement of the Prophet is, because if that was me, I'd be like, hell yes, let's go after them. The Prophet is, we saved the livestock, no need to go after loss of life. Even though the Prophet understands that these people are coming from Ghatafan, meaning that somebody leaked this information from Medina. He knows this. It's obvious that somebody from amongst them, obviously the hypocrites, has sent this secret. But even though it's in front of him, his mercy, his rahmah, is always manifesting. There's no need to be done enough. Salama radiallahu anhu, he's a famous companion because he lives on. Alhamdulillah, he's one of the companions that has a long life. And when the fitna happened between the Sahaba, when the Sahaba, there was they were fighting with one another. Hopefully we'll talk about that later, several lectures from now. Salama left. He said, I'm going back to the desert. So the Sahaba, when they saw him do that, they said, didn't you hear the Prophet ﷺ tell you that after you were in the desert and you come to the city, you can't go back to the desert again? Because there's this idea that Islam is a communal religion, and there's the Sharia dislike. It's not haram, but it dislikes that you live by yourself. And then Salama says, but didn't you hear the Prophet ﷺ said, except in the time of fitna, except in the time of tribulation. So he's like, see ya, I'm leaving. And he was not a part of the fight. And there were some of the Sahaba that took this. So we have this hadith from Salama because of this incident. So he's a famous Sahabi. Obviously, he's very brave. Radiallahu anhu. So this is like the initial instigation to the Battle of Khaybar. As I said, Khaybar is about 60 to 80 kilometers away from Medina. They were responsible for rallying these tribes against Medina during the Battle of the Ditch. They also tried to single-handedly assassinate the Prophet ﷺ several times. So at the very end of Muharram, in this year, the Prophet ﷺ went to Khaybar to end this tension, but he said only the people that were with me in the bay'ah, the bay'ah that we had before at Hudaybiyah, when they had thought that Sayyidina Uthman was killed when he went to do to Mecca, he did to meet with the Quraysh, and they all gave allegiance to the Prophet ﷺ. He said only these people can come with me. Only the people that purely want jihad fi sabilillah. And the reason this phrase comes in the story of Khaybar is because at this time, fighting is a main source of wealth. So we have this term soldiers of fortune, because people that fight, oftentimes they make money. If they're mercenaries, if there are people that live like that. At this time, this was a massive opportunity to gain wealth. And the Prophet ﷺ is telling them this is not what this is for. We're not going for the dunya. We're going to protect our homeland, to protect our people. This is not about money. And the people that gave the allegiance outside of Mecca, they were those people because they were unarmed. Remember, we talked about them not having any weapons because they were going to perform Hajj. They were unarmed. They were grossly outnumbered. They were inside enemy territory. And when they thought that Sayyidina Uthman was killed, they all pledged allegiance that they would fight to the death. That's real faith, that you have faith in that cause. So he said, only these people are going to come with me. So there was about 1,400 fighters, maybe a little bit more that went. Some of the women joined, even though the Prophet ﷺ said, but you weren't with us. And they said, no, we can't leave you to go. So they went and they joined as well. And throughout the battles, many of the women went to service the troops, to tend to the wounded. They played a tremendous role. And there's a tremendous amount of literature that talks about that. Abdullah ibn Ubayy al-Salul, he's the head of the Munafiqun. He's the head of the hypocrites. He was going to be crowned the king of Yathrib before the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina. So he has this big problem with what the Prophet ﷺ is doing. He sends this message to the people of Khaybar. They know that this is happening. So Ghatafan sends reinforcements to Khaybar. Ghatafan left their main area of their tribe. They sent their troops down to Khaybar, but then they had, almost like a whispering that something is behind them, that something is going to attack their home. They thought that the Prophet ﷺ was going to attack, go around, circumvent Khaybar and attack. So they actually left and they went back and they retreated. So now Khaybar is just Khaybar at this point. As the Prophet ﷺ approaches Khaybar, he procures somebody that can help him track a path so that they can go around Khaybar and then attack it from the north rather than attack it from the south. This is the strategy of the Prophet ﷺ. This is what he did. And the tracker, he said, there are a few possibilities. You can go this way, you can go this way. And the Prophet ﷺ said, tell me the names of this way. So that the man would say, this way is called such and such. He says, no, I don't want that. This way is such and such. And he said no to the first three. So the man said, well, there's only the fourth one. It's called such and such. So the Prophet ﷺ said, okay, that's the way we're going to go. They go around Khaybar and they camp right outside of the walls of Khaybar, ready to attack. Along the journey, one of the stories that comes is that Amir ibn al-Aqwa, who was the uncle of Salama, who we talked about a little while ago, he started reciting poetry. And we know that this is something that was not just common, but something that the Prophet ﷺ loved. He loved to hear the singing of praise of the country, praise of the homeland. They would praise the Prophet ﷺ himself in his presence, and he liked that. And this is a sunnah of Islam. So there are, the troops are on the march, so he's starting to praise. So the Prophet ﷺ said, who is that that's singing? And they say it's Amir ibn al-Aqwa. So the Prophet ﷺ says, Yarhamuhullah. May Allah have mercy on him. And this is a strange thing that the Prophet ﷺ would say in that context. And this was an indication that this man would fall in battle, and he did. Amir fell as a shaheed in the battle of Khaybar. They arrive in the evening, And the Prophet's sunnah is that he would not attack a city at night, he would only attack during the day. So they spent the night, that night they prayed, and the Prophet made all of this dua about entering Khaybar, about Allah giving us the best of it, warding off the harm of it. And this is a sunnah supplication when you enter into a city that is established at this time, that we have in our sources. It's not about fighting or anything, it's just about asking Allah's support as you enter into a new place, that good happens and not bad. I guess you can think about it, you take an exit off the highway and you hope you don't get pulled over. So just, you don't want anything bad to happen. Khaybar was a series of fortresses. The ulama of the Sirah, they say that the area of Khaybar were in two sections. The first section had 5 fortresses, and those fortresses were split up between 3 and 2, meaning that they were lumped in different locations. And then the second section of Khaybar had 3 fortresses. And this is why the Quran talks about the fortresses. Do you think you are going to be safe in your castle, in your fortress? These are the references to these type of fortresses that we find in the Battle of Khaybar. They're high, they're walled, the walls are thick, you can't get in, they're well fortified, they have a lot of provisions on the inside, they could stay for a year or more without having to leave. So they are, very well secured. All of the fighting was in the first section of Khaybar. The Prophet ﷺ and the companion Habib ibn al-Mundhir, the Prophet camped, and then Habib ibn al-Mundhir said, "Why are you camping here? This place is too exposed. It's not a good place to stay." So the Prophet ﷺ agreed with him and said, "Okay, we'll follow your instructions." And this is one of the ways of the Prophet ﷺ, is that he would follow the advice of those that were with him in matters of strategy, in matters of the dunya, etc. Before they camped for the night, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Tomorrow I will give the flag, the battle flag, to a man who loves Allah and Allah and His Prophet love him." So obviously everyone is anticipating who's this person going to be. Anyway, to make a long story short, it ends up being Imam Ali. As a matter of fact, Imam Ali wasn't even there. Imam Ali was sick in a tent. So the next day, the Prophet has his flag, and so all of the Sahaba are around the Prophet trying to grab the flag. And he says, "Where's Ali? Where's Ali?" And they say, "Oh, he's complaining, his eye is bothering him. He's in his tent." He said, "Oh, bring him to me." So the Prophet ﷺ, he takes his finger and he takes a spit from his blessed mouth, and he puts his finger on the eye of Sayyidina Ali, and he's cured, and he gives him the flag. And this is one of the miracles of the Prophet ﷺ. And I highlight it because if you follow our literature and poetry, Islamic poetry in all languages, you will find these stories referenced in songs in praise of the Prophet ﷺ. So when you read these poems, if you remember the stories that we're talking about here, you'll understand the reference point, where they come from. All of these things are based, all of these songs of praise of the Prophet ﷺ, they're all based on the Quran and Sunnah. There's nothing in them that's not in the Quran and Sunnah, but you have to know where to look in the Quran and Sunnah to find it. People that criticize that stuff and say, "Oh, this is bid'ahs," because they don't know the Quran and Sunnah. It's as simple as that. So if you follow these details, you'll be able to easily find them. They go to attack the first fortress called Na'am. The Prophet ﷺ sends Imam Ali, and he says to Imam Ali, "Call them to Islam first. Because if Allah guides somebody through you, it is better than everything in the dunya." Meaning that the Prophet ﷺ is telling him, even at this final moment, they're at battle, the people are inside, he knows that it's going to be a big showdown. Even then, he said, maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's a chance that we can end this peacefully. Now, when we read this, you think of, he's trying to convert them and things like that. You have to understand that Islam in this context is not just a religion. The way we understand faith today, where it's my personal belief. It's not about that. It's about a political system as well. So offering them Islam means I'm giving you a chance to redeem what you violated in our constitution, to come back to, for lack of a better word, the republic, or to come back to the homeland. So you have to understand that's what's happening. It's not just about this faith issue, because the proof is that there were Jews that lived in Medina, in the city of Medina, until even after the Prophet ﷺ passed. When you read the Sirah of the Khulafa and things like that, there were people of other faith in Medina at that time. So this is not about religion. This is about politics and power. Of course, this offer is rejected. So this is just one big battle. And the king of Khaybar, or the king of this castle, two ways of looking at it, his name is Marhaba. And he goes down to fight. Remember, we said one of the ways that the people used to fight at this time is that they would duel in the beginning, once, twice, 3 times, and then the armies would fight. So they wanted to duel. So Marhaba comes down, and he's showing off, and he's reciting this poetry that, I'm Marhaba, no one's ever seen the likes of me before, no one can kill me. He's this known warrior in Arabia. So Amir ibn al-Aqwa, he goes and he fights him. They duel, he's injured, and he subsequently dies. And then Imam Ali fights him, and Imam Ali kills him. And in this excursion, Imam Ali, he says, I am the one whose mother called him Haidar. This is why Imam Ali is called Haidar. This is one of his nicknames. This is where it comes from. Again, I'm mentioning this so when you look at the poetry and you see all of our Desi friends, they say, Nari Takbir, Nari Haidar, all of you understand what these people say, oh, this is bid'ah. It's not bid'ah, this comes from the Sunnah and from the Sirah. So there's a long fight, a long battle. Eventually the fortress falls. So that's the first fortress, it falls. The people in the fortress, they retreat to the second one. Ibn al-Mundhir, Habab ibn al-Mundhir, he is now the leader of this part of the army that goes attacks the second fortress. It's called As-Sab. They surrounded it for 3 days. They're giving up hope. The Prophet ﷺ made dua that one of the fortresses that has the most provisions would fall, because now their army is getting hungry. They left Medina and they only had so many things, and all of the provisions are inside the fortress. So this second fortress falls, and it was the one that had all of the provisions, so the troops were able to eat. They came to the third fortress called Al-Zubayr. This was the most fortified. Again, they laid siege for 3 days. But somebody came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, the problem with this fortress is despite all of the provisions, they don't have water. They have to go out for water from somewhere. So if you block the water, they'll capitulate. So they blocked the water and they capitulated, and this fortress fell. Then fortress number 4, it was called Ubay. Same pattern as before. They were dueling. This time the dueler on the Muslim side was Abu Dujana, the famous showman. He has the red bandana. He's like dancing with the horse. He's a big warrior. He duels. He wins, of course. Heavy fighting, and it falls. Before it fell, the Prophet ﷺ ordered the catapults, al-manjaniq in Arabic, ordered the catapults to be brought. Now the catapults, they didn't bring them from Medina. The catapults are from inside the other fortresses that they captured. So all of these fortresses are not only fortified with food and things and livestock, but they have weapons, a lot of weapons, including things like catapults. So the Jews see that the catapults are coming. They're like, okay, we're not going to survive the catapults, obviously, because we built them. So they capitulate, and actually they capitulate. But the men of this fortress escape, and when the castle, or I guess it's like the castle, they stormed the castle. All that was left were men, women, and children. So the men inside this castle or this fortress fled and left the women and the children. After this is the first part of Khaybar. The majority of Khaybar now fell to the Prophet ﷺ. They go to the second part of Khaybar and they lay siege for 14 days. So this is a long, 3 days, now 14 days. This is a long military excursion. Same thing, the Prophet ﷺ brought out the catapults to fire them. They give up. So now we have a surrender. The person that the Prophet ﷺ deals with to negotiate, to parlay the surrender, is Ibn Abi al-Haqiq. He asked to parlay with the Prophet ﷺ. He safe passage. The Prophet ﷺ said, okay, you can come down, you can come out, and we can speak, I give you safe passage. These are the terms. The terms is that you surrender unconditionally. You surrender all of your weapons, and you leave Khaybar with nothing but the clothes on your back. And you have to tell us all of the things that you have, all of your supplies, and you can't hide anything from us. However, Ibn Abi Haqiq, before he parlays, he hid all of the wealth that they could gather, all of the gold and the silver that they could gather, he actually buried it. And he hid this fact from most of the people that were with him. But he keeps going to like this empty part, like this dirt patch in the castle. So people saw him, like this strange behavior. So when this parlay happened, it was divulged to the Prophet ﷺ that he actually had hid this gold and silver and possibly weapons. And not only that, in the details of the story of Ibn al-Haqiq, he actually killed a companion after he agreed to the terms of surrender with the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ arrested him and he was executed for killing this other companion. So when you read these things quickly in the Sirah, you might skip these details. You're like, oh, this is why Orientalists, they'll say things like Muslims were savage, the Prophet ﷺ was a warmonger, vicious, all of these kind of things, because they're not looking at these details the way we are trying to connect the dots, because we are governed by something different. We know that he is the Prophet of mercy. So if we read something that doesn't make sense with that, then we ask, what does that mean? So you investigate, and then you find out all of these details. But this guy, after he agreed to terms of surrender, he killed somebody. So he's executed. That's what happens at a time of war. So that surrender didn't work for the people of Khaybar. So they want another deal. So they negotiate with the Prophet ﷺ and they said, look, they agreed to the following terms, which become the term for surrender, the 50% term. We'll let you stay unarmed. You can work the land, but you have to pay 50% of the proceeds to Medina, to the government. So they agreed to this. So they're allowed to stay. Enemies, combatants, all of this stuff, they're allowed to stay and they're allowed to work and live their life, but they have to pay this, large tax as a result, to compensate for their troubles. The Prophet ﷺ took all of the spoils of war from this battle. It was so much, this was such a windfall of money that all of the Muhajirun repaid their brothers from the Ansar. Remember when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, the Mu'akha, the brotherhood program, in each Muhajir from Mecca, each refugee from Mecca was paired with somebody from the Ansar, and the people of the Ansar gave half of their wealth to the people of Mecca, to the refugees. Right? The refugees were accepted. And they were given, a lot. All of that was repaid. They repaid all of their debts. And this is really, really significant because imagine the type of tension that could be festering between the Muhajirun and the Ansar. Imagine what could happen if they never paid them back after, for example, the Prophet ﷺ passed. Imagine what kind of lingering feelings there could be, etc., etc. So this is like a really significant aspect of the internal functioning of the community. During this time of the negotiation, Ja'far radiallahu anhu comes back from Yemen, comes back from Al-Habasha. They hear about what's going on, so they leave Abyssinia. They come and they join the Prophet ﷺ, and he's been absent for some time now. So the Prophet ﷺ was so happy, he kissed him, he hugged him, and he said, Wallahi, I don't know what made me more happy, our victory of Khaybar or seeing Ja'far. Because the Prophet ﷺ loved his family, loved his people, loved his companions. After they settled on peace, they didn't just pack up and leave. They're going to hang out for a little bit, rest up, eat up, make sure everything is fine, distribute the spoils, and then they leave. So during this time, one of the things that happened is that this is when our mother, Lady Safiya, radiallahu anha, is introduced into the story of the Sirah. We talked about Safiya many, many lectures ago, about how when she heard her father and uncle speaking of the Prophet ﷺ, she said, at that moment, the love for you entered in my heart, and I believed. So she, in her own belief, she's a Muslim. She believes in this message, but she's the of royalty of the people of Khaybar. Her husband was killed during the battle of Khaybar, so she was taken as a slave. And Dihya al-Kalbi, the Sahabi, asked the Prophet ﷺ if he could have one of the slaves from the spoils of war. So he was given, he approved, and he was given Safiya, radiallahu anha. But the Sahaba came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Messenger of Allah, she is the daughter of the leaders of these people. It's not befitting that she becomes a slave and be given to Dihya. She should go to you. So when the Prophet ﷺ, he realized that, he went to Safiya, he gave somebody else to that. He went to Safiya and he offered her Islam, so she laughed. But she laughed because she said, I'm already Muslim. And then she told him the story, and the Prophet ﷺ married her during this episode. And on their way back, this whole time she has a scar on her face. So the Prophet ﷺ said, why do you have this scar? How were you injured? And it is said that she was very beautiful, radiallahu alayhi salam. And she said, I had a dream that the full moon fell in my lap. So when I told my husband about the dream, he slapped me. He said, oh, do you want that man who's from Medina and his kingdom? Meaning the Prophet said, I'm just telling you my dream. So he understood what the dream meant. That she would come into the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the story of Our Lady Safiya alayhi salam. As they were leaving, one of the women of Khaybar, her name was Zainab bint al-Harith. This is the story in which she gave the Prophet ﷺ, some meat that was poisoned. And the Prophet ﷺ came to eat it, and he invited some of his companions to eat from it. And he said, wait, the meat spoke to me. I heard the meat speak to me saying, don't eat me, I'm poisoned. So the Prophet ﷺ said, don't eat from it. But one of the companions, Bishr ibn al-Bara, he ate, he was like already chomping at it. So he died from the poison. After the Prophet ﷺ realized that it was poisoned, they arrested her, and he asked her, why did you do this? And she said, well, I wanted to test you. If you're a man of God, then it's not going to poison you. If you're really a man of God, it's not going to poison you. And if you're a king, Allah will relieve us from your trouble. But after Bishr died, she was executed. And this story specifically, and many ones related, the fuqaha understand from this that the Prophet ﷺ no one was ever killed or executed. The Prophet ﷺ never took revenge for himself. So her execution was because of her crime against Bishr, because he died. And it's not fair that the Prophet ﷺ, there's no justice in that. But for himself, he's, he can forgive and he can, pass on, etc. Again, the details need to be known. Just a few more points. The total death toll, there were about 18 to 20 Muslims that died, and 93 from the people of Khaybar died. So this was statistically, and what we've been talking about, a large battle. Now, the fall of Khaybar is pretty big. In the Jewish community at the time, the news got around pretty fast. So some of the other surrounding Jewish tribes, they sent messages to the Prophet ﷺ seeking peace without even fighting. One of them was Fadak, the tribe of Fadak. They got scared, they sent news to the Prophet ﷺ, they themselves offered that 50% deal that the Prophet ﷺ had with Khaybar, and the Prophet ﷺ accepted. The reason Fadak is important is that there was no battle, and there was 50% coming in. After the death of the Prophet ﷺ, Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam went to Abu Bakr, the Khalifa, and she said, where is my inheritance from Fadak? And Sayyidina Abu Bakr said, but Fadak is not your father's. This is the Ummah's. It belongs to the government. And she said, Wallahi, I am upset with you. And when she said that, he started crying. He's upset, the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ. And he actually submitted his resignation as the Khalifa. This story is important because this is one of the main areas of historic tension between the Sunnis and the Shias. Because the Shias will see Fadak as, being, it belongs to the family of the Prophet ﷺ, etc. And the Sunnis, as I just mentioned, we believe that this was something, it didn't come from battle. So there was no personal booty that came to the Prophet ﷺ, but this is a negotiation, a state negotiation that came to the coffers of the state. So I mention it because that's something that's important. if we go beyond and we talk about that stuff. There was another battle called the Battle of Wadi al-Qura. Again, there was a Jewish coalition of Jewish tribes and surrounding pagan Arab tribes against the Prophet ﷺ. They were attacked by this on the way back to Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ had a slave boy, his name was Mid'am, and he was killed in this battle. And the companions, they came to congratulate the Prophet ﷺ that Mid'am was killed in battle. He's like a shaheed. And the Prophet ﷺ said he's in the hellfire. They were shocked. Why? He said because he stole from the spoils of war in Khaybar. Okay? So this is a story of morality. That it doesn't matter, what other people say. What matters is what's between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This battle lasted 4 days, and at the end of this battle, the 50% deal was given to them as well. The Jewish tribe of Taymat, they were given peace and their wealth. So there was no 50% deal. They were just sort of, peace and we're with you and we don't want any trouble. And then they returned to Medina in the beginning of Rabi' al-Awwal in the year 7. So we're talking about quite a bit, almost 2 months of fighting to deal with this. And this concludes this episode of Khaybar. And we will continue next week, inshallah. Allah ta'ala. Any questions or anything not clear? Before Maghrib?
Why did the Jews abandon the women and the children?
Why did they?
Yeah, why did the men just go running off?
Because they're cowards. I mean, those people were cowards. The Quraysh were not like that. The Quraysh, they took their women and children into battle so that they would be motivated not to run away. And to prove that they're cowardly, and again, I'm not saying like this is not essential that all Jews are, I'm saying of these people, to prove that those people of Khaybar were cowardly, is that they tried to bring this tribe of Ghatafan to do their fighting. They didn't want to fight. They just want to, to wall themselves in. So, some people were like that, unfortunately. Everything is okay? No questions? All right. When is Maghrib? So these are the final 3 minutes of the year. Tomorrow is the first of Muharram. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it a good year for us, inshallah, and for our community and for our families and children. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy on those that we lost this past year. We ask Allah Ta'ala's protection and mercy for our parents and forgiveness for our parents. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for protection and mercy for our children and for our center. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this mosque and bless those that have sacrificed so much to build it and work so tirelessly to sustain it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our efforts to give us the hasanat, to make this a year of prosperity, a year of wealth, a year of happiness. Not just for us, but for all of our brothers and sisters around the world. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for His protection and to alleviate the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Syria, and Kashmir, and the Rohingya, and all of our brothers and sisters that are suffering. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this year a year of ease for them, to relieve their hardship. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our neighbors and to give us the light of this faith. Let it shine through us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us closer to the Quran and closer to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
I have one question. You mentioned the New Year. In Islamic history, did they celebrate the New Year?
Yes.
As we do with Eid.
Yes, actually, they celebrated it so much that some of the ulama criticized the excessive celebration. So that's how we know that, Muslims always like to party. And the ulama would say, they're spending too much money with all of the lights in the mosque and the candles and the oil, and this should only be going for the schools. Yeah, so the Muslims celebrate it, but there's no like liturgy that we have for the New Year, the way we have like for the Mawlid, when people recite the Mawlid poem. We don't have that for the New Year. But yeah, they would come together and they would pray and they would make dhikr and sweets. Every occasion has to have something, sugar, sweets. Yeah, so they did.